The number floating around financial media right now says the average American aged 45 to 54 has a net worth of $975,000, almost $1 million. And that number does something very specific to very specific people. It makes a 45-year-old who is doing reasonably well, paying the mortgage, contributing something to their 401k, actually showing up to their life, feel like a complete financial failure by comparison. Because they're 45, they're nowhere near $900,000. And apparently everyone around them is quietly sitting on a pile of cash while they're standing in the kitchen wondering where the last decade went. Here's the correction that never makes the headline. The median, the actual human being standing exactly in the middle of the American wealth distribution at this age, has $247,000 in net worth, not $975,000, $247,000. That is a gap of $728,000 between those two numbers. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you that even the $247,000 figure is hiding something that changes the entire picture, because most of it isn't money in any form. You can actually use. Once you see what it actually is and what's actively eating it in real time, the scoreboard looks very different from every direction. My name is Tom, and this is Lazy Investor. Today, we're running a full diagnostic on where the average 45-year-old in 2026 actually stands. Not the headline, the X-ray. Here's what I'm going to argue. The financial picture of the typical 45-year-old right now is simultaneously less catastrophic than the $975,000 benchmark makes you feel, and more complicated than the $247,000 median suggests. The good news? You're probably not as far behind as a broken benchmark is telling you. The bad news? The wealth you do have is organized in a way that makes it structurally difficult to use when you need it most. And the reason this has gotten genuinely strange is that for the first time in a generation, the standard benchmarks, the salary multipliers, the retirement targets, the financial planner playbooks were designed for an economy that stopped existing somewhere around 2015. I'll walk you through 4 things about the financial reality of being 45 right now that most coverage skips entirely. I'll give you the real percentile breakdown so you can place yourself on an honest scoreboard. And I'll end with 3 specific, non-generic actions calibrated to the actual situation of a 45-year-old in 2026. Not a 25-year-old, not someone whose parents bought them a house. You. Let me start with a framework that's going to run through everything in this video. I call it the 2-bucket problem. When you hear net worth, your brain processes it as one number, everything owned minus everything owed. That's bucket 1. For the median 45-year-old, bucket 1 holds $247,000. Sounds solid. But bucket 1 has a lock on it. Not a metaphorical lock, a legal, structural, financial lock. The largest piece of bucket 1 is home equity. According to Federal Reserve data, confirmed across multiple data sets, home equity represents the dominant asset for the median American household from age 35 onward. For the median 45-year-old, somewhere between 50 and 60% of total net worth is locked inside their primary residence. You cannot eat home equity. You cannot pay an electric bill with home equity. Converting it to cash requires either selling the house, which means you immediately need somewhere else to live, refinancing and extending the mortgage, which means paying interest on interest for another decade, or taking out a home equity line of credit at rates currently running 8 to 9%, which is a bank charging you 9% annually to borrow your own money. That's a genuinely impressive business model if you think about it. The rest of bucket 1 mostly lives in retirement accounts, 401ks and IRAs that you legally cannot access before age 59 and a half without a 10% penalty on top of ordinary income. Tax. In a high-stress withdrawal, that could mean losing 35 to 40% of every dollar you pull. So bucket 2, the money available before retirement without penalty, the actual financial floor is much thinner than the headline net worth suggests. And the entire infrastructure of American financial advice was built to optimize bucket 1 as if bucket 2 is a footnote. This video is about bucket 2. What's in it, what's shrinking it, and how to build it before the window closes. If you strip home equity out of national wealth figures entirely, according to the Federal Reserve's distributional data, median net worth collapses by roughly 70%. Read that again. The $250,000 net worth that reads as fine collapses to something in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $90,000 once you remove the asset you live inside. That's the actual working capital of the median American at 45. Not 7 figures, not even 6. A floor roughly the size of a decent emergency fund and a modest investment account. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the number that matters more than your headline net worth. But first, let's look at what's actually happening inside the retirement piece of bucket 1, because it's where the real math gets uncomfortable. Fidelity has a rule of thumb that's become essentially industry gospel. By age 50, you should have 6 times your annual salary saved in retirement accounts. 6 times. If you're earning near the median household income in 2026, roughly $117,000, that benchmark says you should have approximately $700,000 already sitting in retirement savings before you blow out the candles on the 50th birthday cake. Here's Vanguard's actual data from their How America Saves 2025 report, drawn from nearly 5 million real defined contribution plan participants. The median 401k balance for Americans aged 45 to 54 is $60,763. Not $600,000. Not even close. $60,000. The average balance is much higher. Vanguard clocks it at $188,643. Fidelity shows something similar for Gen X, but we've already established what averages do in this country. The median is the real person. And the median 45-year-old is sitting on $60,000 in their primary retirement account, which by Fidelity's own benchmark puts them roughly 10 times behind where they're supposed to be by their next birthday. When you expand to total retirement savings, 401k, IRA, every account, the median for this bracket runs somewhere around $115,000. Better, still nowhere near $700,000 now. You might think the problem is you don't have enough in retirement. But actually, the problem is you have a parallel financial system running in the background that's destroying value faster than the retirement account is building it. According to Experian's 2025 Consumer Debt Study, confirmed across their annual research, Gen X, people currently aged 45 to 60, carries the highest average credit card balance of any generation in America, $9,600. And credit card interest rates, as of early 2026, are averaging approximately 22 to 23% annually per Lending Tree and Experian data, even after several Federal Reserve rate cuts in 2024. Run that math. $9,600 at 22%. Minimum payments only, it takes 7 to 8 years to eliminate. You'll pay close to $9,000 in total interest. The full costs of that original $9,600 balance, nearly $19,000, for debt that probably started as a few bad months during an inflationary stretch. Meanwhile, $60,000 in a 401k at a 7% annual return generates about $4,200 per year in compound gains. On paper, the retirement account is winning the race. But the credit card isn't just charging interest. It's consuming the available cash flow that could have been going into savings. The $400 to $500 a month in minimum payments and interest on that card, redirected to a retirement account for 20 years, would compound to somewhere around $250,000 by age 65. The credit card is the leak in bucket 2. Every dollar of income that flows toward 22% interest is a dollar that can't compound at 7%. You can pour water into the savings bucket all day. If there's a hole running 22%, the level barely moves. And it's not just credit cards. Gen X leads all generations in auto loan balances, averaging around $27,800 per borrower per Experian's 2025 data. A meaningful percentage carry student loan debt, sometimes their own, increasingly parent plus loans taken out to finance their kids' education. Parent Plus loans currently originate above 8% with origination fees on top. They don't qualify for standard refinancing programs, and they don't respond to most forgiveness schemes. They just sit there, compounding against you, taken on by parents trying to give their kids what their own parents gave them. Gen X also has the distinction of having lost 38% of their median net worth between 2007 and 2010, a steeper loss than any other generation tracked by Cerulli Associates. They were rebuilding from essentially zero, exactly when assets were recovering. By the time they'd accumulated enough to take meaningful investment risk, the post-pandemic explosion in equities and real estate had already happened. Late to every bull market, present for every crash. That is not bad decision making. That is a specific generational timeline. By the way, hit subscribe if you're getting value here. The algorithm has a very short memory, and I'd rather not have you need to find this channel twice. Now let me introduce someone. We'll call him Marcus. Not a person I know, a composite of a genuinely common situation. Marcus is 45, works in supply chain management, makes about $110,000 a year. He has $62,000 in his 401k, contributing at 6% the enrollment default he set 8 years ago and never changed. He's carrying $9,600 on a credit card he's had for 3 years. He has a car loan, a mortgage with about 20 years left, a small emergency fund, a daughter in 8th grade, and his life is about to get layered, which brings us to the part that genuinely changes the math. Stay with me, because this next beat changes everything about how you interpret the benchmarks most 45-year-olds are measuring themselves against. According to Pew Research Center, 54% of Americans in their 40s have a living parent age 65 or older and are either raising a child under 18 or providing financial support to an adult child. More than half. That is the highest rate of any age group in the country. And a 2025 survey by Finance of America found that 69% of people in this sandwiched position, up from 64% just 3 years ago, report direct financial pressure from the dual caregiving responsibility. Let me build the math that the retirement calculators never build. Genworth's 2025 cost of care survey puts median assisted living costs at approximately $54,000 per year nationally, with memory care running considerably higher. Medicare covers hospitalization and acute medical procedures. It does not cover the cost of someone living in a facility because they can no longer safely cook their own meals or remember their grandchildren's names. That bill goes somewhere, and for a large percentage of the sandwich generation, it lands directly on their monthly cash flow. On the other side of the sandwich, surveys consistently find roughly half of American parents are financially supporting at least one adult child, with average monthly contributions running $1,300 to $1,400, about $16,000 per year. Add both ends of the squeeze together. A few $100s a month contributing to an aging parent's care, $16,000 a year flowing to an adult child. That's $20,000 to $25,000 a year, leaving the household in obligations to other generations before anyone has discussed college for the younger kids, vacations that haven't happened in 4 years, or retirement for themselves. And here's the part that makes the standard financial advice feel completely disconnected from reality. The benchmark. Have 6 times your salary saved by 50. That benchmark assumes a household where cash flow is available to maximize retirement contributions. It does not account for $23,000 a year going sideways into multi-generational obligations. It does not model the sandwich. It models a linear household that has become the exception, not the rule. Nearly 75% of sandwich generation respondents in a 2025 Athene Harris Poll survey said they've adjusted their retirement goals to accommodate family financial support. They're not being irresponsible. They are the fulcrum. And there's genuinely no budgeting hack that makes the math work when you're running 3 households on 1 income stream. Here's the honest confession version of what I want to say here. Knowing these numbers, the gap, the credit drag, the multi-generational squeeze, and having a framework to actually act on them are 2 entirely different things. I spent years surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers running my own business, watched money move in ways that most people never see documented. And what I kept seeing wasn't an information problem. People know they're behind. They know they have credit card debt. What they don't have is a framework that translates that knowledge into specific sequence decisions at specific ages. So I built one. It's called The Exit Code, a digital book, 8 chapters built on 50 years of actual retirement data, no filler, no motivational padding. 2 elements I want to call out because they connect directly to what we've been talking about. First, the book goes deep on what I call the 4% trap, the withdrawal rate that breaks down for people who haven't had a perfectly smooth accumulation phase, and lays out a dynamic withdrawal method that replaces it real-world retirement portfolios. Most people your age haven't had a linear savings trajectory. The standard 4% rule was built for someone who did. Second, there's a complete analysis of what I call the invisible bill. $14,000 a year in healthcare coverage that materializes the moment someone tries to retire before Medicare starts at 65. If you're thinking about leaving work at 62 or 63, this is the cost that destroys the plan you spent 30 years building. It's invisible right up until you need it. You can get the exit code through the link in the description for less than a dinner out. Every year you postpone getting a real framework on this compounds against you, not as a marketing line, as arithmetic. The math on delayed decisions doesn't get friendlier with time. Now, the thing most 45-year-olds are quietly counting on to eventually close the gap, the cavalry from above. The great wealth transfer is real. Cerulli Associates, a Boston-based research firm, has updated their projections. Approximately $124 trillion is expected to move from older generations to younger ones through 2048, up from the earlier 84 trillion projection, because asset prices have exploded since the original estimates. And according to their 2025 research, Gen X people currently aged 45 to 60 is projected to inherit approximately $1.4 trillion per year over the next decade, more than any other generation in that window. But here's the reversal. According to Cerulli's own research, approximately 50% of that total transfer comes from just the top 2% of households. Half of all the money, 2% of all the families. In practical terms, the Great Wealth Transfer is a headline event at the macro level and nearly invisible at the median. Northwestern Mutual surveys Americans annually on their inheritance expectations and plans. What they keep finding, far more people expect to receive an inheritance than are actually planning to leave one. Only about 22% of Boomer and Gen X households report actively planning to leave money behind. Do that math. Roughly a third of younger Americans are counting on an inheritance. About 1 in 5 households is actually generating one. The expectations do not match the plans. And then there's the mechanism that's been quietly reducing whatever inheritance was in the pipeline. Long-term care costs in America are not covered by Medicare. Assisted living at $54,000 a year, memory care at $80,000 or more. These expenditures eat estate value faster than most people plan for. The house that was supposed to become an inheritance instead becomes the collateral for 4 years of cognitive care. I've heard this story enough times from enough different sources that it functions as a pattern, not an edge case. The money disappears one statement at a time before it can transfer. There's a real irony in this that's worth sitting with. The same sandwich squeeze eating the retirement savings of 45-year-olds right now is also the mechanism by which whatever inheritance was eventually supposed to reach them gets consumed first. The money leaves the generation above to pay for care. The 45-year-old's cash flow leaves their household to contribute to that care. And neither generation ends up with what the wealth transfer narrative promised. The Great Wealth Transfer is real. It is, as a matter of documented record, overwhelmingly concentrated at the top of the wealth distribution. The median 45-year-old quietly banking on an inheritance that rescues their retirement is, statistically speaking, not in the same conversation. There's one more piece of this puzzle. It's the piece most people are hoping will work out somehow. I want to show you why the timeline on that piece just moved significantly, and what that means for someone retiring in the early 2030s. The 2025 Social Security Trustees Report, released in June 2025, projects that the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, the fund that pays retirement benefits, will be depleted in 2033. Not 2035, as some older coverage still states. 2033. That's the official government number, from the government's own trustees, published in their own annual report. Then, in July 2025, Social Security's chief actuary reported that the One Big Beautiful Bill, signed on the 4th of July 2025, would advance trust fund depletion by another year, potentially to 2032. Let me be precise about what depletion means, because this gets misreported constantly. Depletion does not mean Social Security disappears. It means the reserve fund that has been backstopping payments hits zero. From that point, the program can only pay out what it receives in real-time payroll taxes. The trustees project that at depletion, approximately 77% of scheduled benefits would be payable. A 23% automatic across-the-board reduction, no congressional vote required, it would just happen. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that a typical couple retiring in the year of insolvency would see roughly $16,500 removed from their annual expected benefits. Here's the timing collision that nobody seems to want to talk about plainly. The oldest Gen Xers, born in 1965, reach full retirement age of 67 in 2032. They arrive at the retirement finish line in exactly the same window when the fund reserves may run out. That is not conspiracy theory. That is demographic arithmetic. The worker to beneficiary ratio tells the structural story clearly. In 1960, more than 5 workers were paying into Social Security for every beneficiary drawing from it. As of 2024, that ratio was approximately 3 to 1. It is projected to decline to less than 2.5 to 1 by mid-century. The system was designed for a specific demographic pyramid. That pyramid has inverted. The trustees publish the updated depletion date every June. Congress has been informed. And every year, nothing substantive happens, not because the information is unavailable, but because the political cost of solving it before it's a crisis is higher than the political cost of blaming someone else after it becomes one. I find this genuinely funny in the way you find something funny when the alternative is being enraged by it indefinitely. So, let's total the real picture. The median 45-year-old in 2026 has a headline net worth of $247,000, most of which is locked in a house. A median retirement account of $60,000, roughly 10 times behind a benchmark that may not even be calibrated correctly for their economy. Credit card debt at 22%, running in parallel against a retirement account growing at 7%. A more than 50% statistical chance of being financially squeezed between aging parents and adult children at the same time. A great wealth transfer that is real in aggregate and concentrated at the top. And a Social Security check that, absent congressional action, arrives at 77 cents on the dollar right around the time Gen X is trying to stop working. That is the real scoreboard. And what I want to say out loud plainly is this. Most of those forces are not the result of bad decisions. They're the result of a historical timeline that worked against a specific cohort at every key inflection point. The housing boom happened when they were too young to participate. 2008 hit when they were supposed to be accumulating. The post-pandemic asset explosion happened when they were 45 and already locked into their obligations. They lost 38% of their median net worth in the crisis and had to rebuild from scratch while other generations rode the recovery. That's not failure. That's a specific collision between a generation and the economic calendar. But let's come back to Marcus. Marcus is still 45. Net worth around $230,000, majority in the house. 401k at $62,000. Credit card at $9,600, running for 3 years. Car loan, helping with his mom's care intermittently. His adult son moved back in 6 months ago. His daughter still needs braces. If Marcus does nothing, keeps contributing 6%, carries the card, makes no structural changes, here's a 20-year outcome at a 7% return. His 401k grows to approximately $265,000 by 65. The credit card grinds along for 7 more years before it's finally gone. His net worth inches upward through slow home appreciation and mortgage paydown. Total accessible retirement savings at 65, somewhere in the range of $350,000. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that generates $14,000 a year in portfolio income. Add a Social Security check. At 77% of his projected benefit, call it about $17,000 annually. Total retirement income, $31,000 a year. His current household income is $110,000. That is not retirement. That is the continuation of financial anxiety in a different zip code. Now here's what happens if Marcus makes 2 specific adjustments. The first Monday after reading this, he calls HR and bumps his 401k contribution from 6% to 11%. On his salary, that's approximately $420 additional dollars per month before tax. He also adds $250 per month above the minimum payment on the credit card. At that pace, he eliminates the $9,600 balance in about 30 months. The moment the card is gone, he redirects that payment into a Roth IRA starting at $60 per month, increasing it as cash flow stabilizes. Total incremental change from Monday morning, roughly $600 to $700 per month in redirected capital. Over 20 years, at 7%, that compounds to approximately $370,000 to $400,000 on top of his existing account balance. Combined total retirement savings at 65, somewhere between $620,000 and $680,000, with a Social Security benefit that actually supplements rather than anchors. From 2 decisions made before the second cup of coffee, not a second income, not a real estate empire, not a crypto bet, 2 automations and a phone call to HR. He still hasn't solved the sandwich problem. His mom is still in care. His son is still on the couch. His daughter still hasn't gotten those braces. But his bucket 2 has grown from roughly $40,000 to something approaching $90,000. That is not generational wealth. That is a financial floor. The difference between a bad year bending you and a bad year breaking you is the size of that floor. The home equity retirement strategy, by the way, the quiet plan where you stay in the house indefinitely and let the kids sort it out eventually. I've seen this plan in the wild more often than most financial content will admit. It does have advantages. Minimal spreadsheet maintenance, clear estate simplicity. The one obvious flaw is that executing it requires dying, which has historically been considered a suboptimal exit from the working world. Though I will grant it does eliminate sequence of returns risk entirely. Here's the real scoreboard for 2026, calibrated to the Federal Reserve and Vanguard data. So you know exactly where you stand. Under $48,000 in net worth at 45 to 54, bottom 25%. A significant portion of the population, not out of options, but the score needs to be honest before anything else can change. Around 247,000, you are the median, exactly in the middle of the American distribution, which is a real data point, not a permanent outcome. Around 680,000, top 25% of your age group. You're doing well in actual terms. Your job now is fee drag and tax efficiency. A 1% annual fee on $400,000 costs you over $170,000 in loss compounding over 30 years, which is a real number that your current fund lineup may be extracting from you quietly. Around 1.4 million, top 10%. You probably already know most of this. 3 levels of where you might actually be and what each level calls for. Level 1, your net worth is primarily home equity. Your retirement account is under $50,000 and your bucket 2 is essentially empty. If this is you, the priority is not optimization. It's stopping the bleeding. Eliminate the highest interest debt. Establish a small automatic retirement contribution that captures at least the employer match. That's a guaranteed 50 to 100% return that no investment product can touch, and do not add to any debt above 10% interest. 1 lever at a time. Level 2. You have some retirement savings, some equity, But cash flow is constrained by multi-generational obligations. The move here is not to heroically max every account simultaneously. It's to pick the single highest leverage action. Usually that's getting to the full 401k employer match. After that, a very boring taxable brokerage account with automatic contributions to a low-cost index fund. Unsexy, effective. Level 3. You have over $200,000 in liquid retirement assets. You're capturing the full employer match and you're carrying no revolving credit card debt. If you're here at 45, your job is not to save harder. It's to stop the two quiet destroyers, fee drag and tax inefficiency. Same boring index fund, lower expense ratio, Roth conversion in lower income years, stress-tested Social Security projection. That's it. Now, 3 practical takeaways specific to your situation at 45 in 2026. 1. Calculate your bucket 2 number this week. Not an estimate, open each account, apply the 10% penalty and income tax to the retirement accounts as if you access them today, add up what's actually liquid. That number tells you your real financial floor more accurately than any net worth calculator. 2. If you are carrying credit card debt above 15% interest, paying it off is the single highest return investment available to you right now. Eliminating a 22% balance is a guaranteed 22% return. The S&P 500 has historically averaged 12 to 13% with significant volatility. A guaranteed 22 beats that in any scenario where the cost is certain, clear the card before you optimize anything else. 3. Run your Social Security projection at 77% right now. Go to the Social Security Administration's website, pull your current earnings statement, find your projected benefit, and multiply by 0.77. Build your retirement income model around that number. If Congress acts before 2032 or 2033, you'll have surplus. If they don't, you won't be blindsided by a 23% cut to your baseline income assumptions when you need them most. The 45-year-old who knows their bucket 2 has eliminated the 22% leak and has stress tested their Social Security projection is playing a fundamentally different game than the one staring at a $975,000 headline average and quietly assuming they failed. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. Pull up a 20-year comparison between a 2-fund index portfolio and the average actively managed fund, or the average crypto portfolio after fees, taxes, and the one moment in every cycle when someone panic sold during a 40% drawdown at 3 in the morning. The boring machine wins every time. The noisy one has better marketing and worse